I've been trying to find this like Twitter post for I don't even know, like 30 minutes almost. Today we're gonna talk about some post that was posted on Twitter regarding VTubers and whatnot. Mostly just kind of giving praise to the Blockers Brawl roster for being what kind of people apparently have wanted to an extent. I understand, of course, but you know what I mean. And within the post, it's so weird because I don't see it in front of me. But within the post, it was talked about that this is actually what people want, and people don't want the VTubers and the variety, blah blah blah, whatever, blah 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 blah, right? Whatever, right? I come in defense because I think you guys are generalizing, and it's a bit interesting. So, I use the label VTuber pretty often in the sense of, hey, there is one common thing but behind a lot of the people that are in Block Wars, which is that they are VTubers. However, I use that in a descriptive way rather than a argumentative way, if that makes sense, right? I use it as oh, they get a VTuber in the sense of like, oh, they get a like lower placing variety player, which is usually what the VTuber slot on a team is represented by. Obviously, it doesn't apply to everybody. There's plenty of VTubers in the Blockers roster that are quite good at Minecraft, but generally speaking, that is, for example, a usage of where I say VTuber. What some people do is they write off part of the newcomer additions to Block Wars by saying, oh my god, just another VTuber again. To kind of make it seem like every VTuber is like a clone of each other, as if they are the same. Which, if you've watched a VTuber before, if you've cared to engage with the VTuber part of the Blockers roster, whether it is from them being on a team with like Feinberg or watching their POV or whatever else, right? You should know that they are quite unique. They're quite distinct. Yes, they're gonna be common characteristics between some of them, right? Mostly because of a cultural difference. A lot of VTubers are influenced by Japanese culture, and that will have impact on how they speak. Look at me, for example, right? I used to sound like Technoblade because I used to watch Technoblade all the time, and that's why, as much as my maybe voice is somewhat similar, because I watch this guy a lot, I start talking like him. If you watch anime a lot, you might take up some anime speak. If you are just more involved in that type of culture, etc. Maybe if you are Japanese, etc., right? You're going to talk a certain way, etc., behave a certain way, maybe, etc. It's just different culture. That's an overarching similarity, sure. But there's so many different types of VTubers. There's the chill VTuber. There's the high energy VTuber. There's the actual like high skill gamer. There's the one that just kind of just chats, hangs around, etc. Right? You have like an Iron Mouse who is really high energy and really like just a bit more bubbly in that type of sense. And then you have other VTubers. Someone who I usually refer to as like different from what I think the stereotype maybe is, like a Giga, for example, who Giga is, I've teamed with Giga plenty of times. Giga is a staple participant in Block Wars, is a lot more chill, just a lot more like, you could call it mature maybe in a sense. I think that's how you would perceive it from maybe the more Western view of the culture, but Giga's a lot more chill when it comes to how she does content, and I think there's plenty of other VTubers who fall under that too. And then there's also, of course, the male VTubers who I think get overlooked sometimes a little bit, but there's also a lot of difference you can find there. For example, literally with the Hollow Star boys, who've recently made a little bit more of a wave in Block Wars between Haka, Shinri, and Ruse. Those are three entirely different characteristics, where Haka is this like really high energy guy, Shinri's a lot more on the chill side, and then Ruse is this like kind of in between. It's kind of, and then the voices are also very distinct, and it's just like, oh, you got a whole array of different characteristics all together. But to an extent, at least from what I assume is mostly the like Minecrafter audience, they all get thrown under one label: VTuber. Doesn't matter if you are, a high energy, low energy, chill, not chill, turbo, good gamer, bad gamer, whatever. They all get thrown under one label. And I don't know. It just feels a little bit weird. If you want to be critical of part of the Blockers roster, at least engage with it or try to engage with it, right? It's the same. The way I would think about it is like an analogy is if you only eat like fast food, chicken nuggets, pizza, etc., you can't say you don't like fruit. If you've never had fruit, how do you know you don't like fruit? There's so many different fruit. You can't say, oh, I don't like fruit. Even if you've only had an apple and you don't like apple, you can't say, oh, I don't like fruit because I don't like apple. Have you ever had a strawberry? That tastes entirely different. Same with VTubers. Maybe you've tried a VTuber before. Maybe you just picked one that wasn't completely up to your taste profile in terms of content creation. There's plenty of other VTubers you may enjoy way more. Maybe there's a whole selection of people that it would be way more comfortable with as a content creator. Additionally, something that I think was interesting in response to that, there was some talk about like variety this, variety that, and people said, oh, I wish they added variety people I actually know. And then they mentioned like, I think it was like Doug, Ludwig, Tens, and like Alpharad. And it's like, okay, let's reality check. These people don't really play Minecraft. We don't really have contact with them. How would we get them involved in Block Wars? That would be quite a challenge, be quite difficult. Is it impossible? Not necessarily. You could get lucky, right? Sometimes somebody will just show interest. Maybe somebody in the roster will bring a friend and their friend just happens to be Pokemon, right? I don't know. Sometimes that happens, but generally speaking, that is an unrealistic expectation. And if they're not going to be in an MCC in terms of like a Ludwig or a Ray or a whatever, like that type of creator, that level of creator, I'd say OTV and Friends is the most common archetype there, right? If they're not going to be in an MCC, they're unlikely to then also make an appearance in a Block Wars, generally speaking, just because they are familiar with MCC. So if they are already not participating in MCC, unless they're just not getting invited, right, I don't really think you should expect them to make an appearance in a Block Wars. Generally speaking, though, that's just my opinion. For example, like a Jacksepticeye, for example, right? I wouldn't expect Jacksepticeye to ever make an appearance in Block Wars. He's welcome, but he probably won't because he's not in an MCC or hasn't been in an MCC in a while, despite there being, you know, pride and charity and whatever. He hasn't been there, so probably not going to be in a Block Wars either. That's kind of the logic that I'm using here. So, yeah. Either way, that's just a little bit of a thing I wanted to mention because I'm kind of, you know, as much as I understand people maybe just aren't caught up to speed with how things have developed, it does get to a point where I am seeing the same quote-unquote feedback, same complaints rather, regarding things, and it feels like we're in an endless loop where some people will learn, but then some people don't, and then they complain, and then they don't even try to, you know, expand their knowledge. They don't even try to gain more info on backing up their argument. They just have this belief, and they don't really wish to proceed in their thought pattern for getting, you know, a proper argument. If you said, I don't like VTubers, and you've tried like multiple of them, or you've watched them, and every single time, or maybe you watch like a certain POV, and every single time you watch this POV, there's a person on the team that annoys you, and it's always a VTuber. I understand, right? I'm not saying you have to like them. I'm just saying that I think the majority of people who are against them or complain about VTubers don't watch VTubers, or they don't care about VTubers, or they've never even given them a chance, and that's silly. It feels a bit odd, especially because I've spoken to plenty of people, my friends, and even just talked about it publicly, about like Block Wars and what some of the inclusions have done to their profile of content creators that they watched. And there's many people who've told me, hey, I saw somebody in Block Wars that I've never heard of before on the team with somebody I watched. This person was really fun, and now I watch him, which is perfect. That's like exactly what I want. That's great. I love seeing, especially within Minecraft, I think this is common. I love seeing people expand their profile, their taste profile of content, because I used to just watch Minecraft for a very brief amount of time, and then I expanded because I like Pokemon, and then I also did Smash Bros. Watching. That's how I got into like Alpha Ride, for example, right? And then after that, I got into cooking, and then I got into like fitness a little bit, and then I got into music, or I got into music, then I got into fitness, and then now it's more like adult stuff in terms of like trading and business and whatever that type of bullshit, right? But regardless, right? If you expand your interests past this one thing, right? You don't just hyper focus on one thing. You expand on more things. You will not only diversify your taste profile. It makes you more interesting as a human being, honestly, as well. It's gonna make it much easier for you to talk to people. It's going to be much easier for you to pick up on new skills and stuff, new information, etc. And I just think it's a net positive to expand your taste profile in content watching. Content creation isn't really that important. If you want to just only do Minecraft content creation, right, that's completely fine. I don't think there's any issue with that, really. But in terms of watching, I always recommend to not just stick to one thing and diversify your taste profile, because it is interesting. And this also can apply to gaming with Block Wars. Maybe you'll find somebody that you like from watching them on a team in Block Wars. I think this is honestly a pretty good opportunity for both sides, even because there might be a Minecrafter you've never heard of before that's in this roster that you think is fun. But it's always fun if you want to, watch a different POV for this event, considering this is, the last Block Wars before going on break. If there are plenty of creators in this roster, which is the case, that you may want to watch, different POVs you want to watch, you maybe pick up on a content creator that's on a team that you think is fun. Maybe you watch Feinberg and you're like, this Quiet guy is funny, let me check out his YouTube channel, and then suddenly you get into the commentary community. Or maybe you watch Charlie, right, and then you see Dr. Donut and you're like, wait, oh, I like this Dr. Donut guy, let me see what his content's like, etc., right? There's plenty of opportunities all across the board here. Maybe you've never watched the Blockers before, you watch Speed Silver and you're like, wow, SK sounds so awesome, let me watch SK, and now boom, you're into Marvel Rivals. Like, see, it's that simple. So anyways, enough yap, you get what I mean. That's it. So VTubers are not just all the same person. There's plenty of different examples. You should try to explore. I think if you are somebody who is a bit more on the chill side of VTubing, I think you maybe would like more of a Giga or a May. And then in terms of more high energy VTubing, I think you could enjoy some of the other people who've been to Blockers. I think Haka is a great example. Haka is really fun. I think Mooney previously, of course, as well, was in Blockers. It's a good example. I think Deme is a pretty appealing VTuber to watch as well. I think Rain can be really fun as well to watch. So I think there's plenty of options. Anyways, enough yap. See you later. Goodbye.